Are the Chicago Bulls making moves or are they making excuses? We're going to be talking about an article that suggests the Chicago Bulls are not owning up to their mistakes of making moves prior to the trade deadline and what Mark Eversley had to say about the youth movement in Chicago. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and this is another episode of Bulls Digest. Before we jump into it, I wanted to let you know that 74.1% of you that watch the videos are not subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you mash that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with the latest news and happenings around your Chicago Bulls. It would mean a lot to us as we try to reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers before the NBA season starts. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the hot topic of the day. And we're looking at an article that suggests, well, that the Chicago Bulls are not owning up to their mistakes. And so let's jump into what GM Mark Eversley had to say. And essentially, he is talking about the trade deadline, and he's talking about the fact that the Chicago Bulls did not make a trade. And he was talking about how you have players like DeMar and Vuce and how they wanted to stay loyal to those players and give them one more chance before they went ahead and pivoted to go in the direction that they're going in right now. And so based off what Mark Eversley had to say in that particular quote, I just think that the Chicago Bulls knew going into last season that this perhaps could be the last particular version of this team. And I think that as the Chicago Bulls front office knew that, they should have come into this situation saying like, look, if we are headed to a play-in situation, let's go ahead and if you know that DeMar DeRozan wants to get into a winning situation, why don't you start to look at situations like that that will help you get some draft capital back, would help DeMar DeRozan get to a destination where he wants to go to, perhaps play for a winner. And the same for Vuce as well. If you've had that conversation with Vuce, then you should definitely go ahead and have Vuce traded over to a team where he's able to play in a system where he can perhaps win something or whatever that situation looks like. I just think that the Chicago Bulls should have had those type of conversations before the season started and just had a simple plan for last season saying that, look, if we get to this point and it looks this way, then we're going to have to start to trade in order to start this youth movement sooner than later. Because who knows? I mean, maybe they would have got some draft assets back right now that they could have used either in the future or they could have used it in this last draft class. I've said it before, like it would have been great to get a guy like Vucevic like we did, but then also to get Khalil Ware or somebody else to go along with him. So that's what I'm saying. The Chicago Bulls just essentially kind of hurt themselves by not having a plan to start off. And so if you want to go ahead and say it's because you were loyal to the players, you know, I guess, but I'm not sure if that's really going to be validated with the Chicago Bulls fan base, considering that we all knew that this Chicago Bulls team needed to pivot sooner than later. All right, so next up, let's talk about what Mark Eversley had to say about the idea of tanking. All right, and so there's a lot of people out there that are saying, look, the Chicago Bulls are looking to tank. I think that they're going to go ahead and they're looking to win just about 15 games or lesser, which I think is what the Detroit Pistons did, if I'm not mistaken. But here's what he had to say about the possibility of tanking. All right. And so he's saying that, look, we are not looking to tank. We're not looking to go ahead and to tear down this particular roster. He's like, look, I don't want to have a year where we're winning 15 games and focusing on the lottery. And he also feels that, look, I am not interested in just looking at the future and building through the draft. All right, and so again, he puts out some interesting points and he lets you know that, look, the Chicago Bulls are not interested in doing a full-on rebuild. And I've said this before, you know, they've had several different options to approach this, but it looks like they're doing a soft rebuild, right? Like they're not tearing it all down. And I think that, by doing that, you're just prolonging the obvious. Even though I will give the Chicago Bulls some credit because they have gotten the roster younger, right? And so they're moving in a good direction. And much like what Mark Eversley had to say in this particular article, he talks about the fact that, look, we have some younger players now that have some experience that are going to give us a longer runway of sustaining wins down the line. And so I get it. Like, you do have that. I love the experience factor with Josh Giddey, who's coming over from an OKC team that went pretty deep in the West, and he's also been on some other successful teams over there. And then you look at Kobe White, you look at Dosunmu. Yes, I know they haven't been in a playoff series per se, but they have been in a play-in situation, which is, you have to win or go home. So, I mean, that type of pressure, that type of experience, I definitely think helps them. And then Patrick Williams, a younger player who has had some experience with starting and coming off the bench, even though he's still trying to find his way. Jalen Smith, a guy that when you look at the numbers, he's very good when you give him some starting time. And so I think that experience is there as well. So I do really understand what he's saying in those regards. But, I just think that, to sit back and say that you can't or you're not looking to build through the draft, like, that's a little bit of a head scratcher because you're going to have to build in the draft in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's not going for a Cooper Flag, like I understand that if you're not wanting to tank and just put all your eggs into that one basket for Cooper Flag, I understand that, but you're still going to have to be able to draft well, which is what the Chicago Bulls have really been shaky on, right? And so one of the things that this article last closes off with is the fact that, the Chicago Bulls are going to be, looking in that 8th, 9th, 10th spot, either way that they look at this thing, all right? And so it's saying that, look, they're not better than Boston, they're not better than the Bucks, the Knicks, the Sixers, and saying that they're going to be able to probably match up with teams like the Pacers, Cleveland, and Orlando. But again, that's going to be tough for the Chicago Bulls to, beat them, depending on what's going to happen, especially to those teams. Like a team like Cleveland, it's going to depend on injuries. Same with Indiana. And I think Orlando, it just depends if they can now get over the hump. I mean, they definitely showed signs last year, but they're still a young team growing. So, I mean, they could take a little bit of a digress, but it looks like they're headed on the up and up. But either way, even when you look at a team like Orlando, you see how they were able to strategically build through the draft and then also add some key free agents as well and do it in a way that financially makes sense. I think that that's what the key for the Chicago Bulls has to be. But have they kind of covered up for some of their mistakes? Yeah, I mean, still, they're not taking ownership of the fact that they didn't have a plan. And when they saw that this group was not going to be successful, they didn't take an opportunity in going out there and maximizing on assets. So, yeah, I definitely think so. But let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Do you think the Chicago Bulls continue to make excuses for their prior mistakes? Do you agree with me in the sense that I think the Chicago Bulls are going to have to take a path a lot like the Orlando Magic, where they're going to have to, yes, build in the draft, but they're also going to have to be a little bit more strategic when they start to bring in some free agents and stuff like that. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. And even though the Chicago Bulls still really haven't fully embraced a rebuild, I'm still saying go Bulls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.